And that was part of the reason for the guide, is to show just how complicated this issue can be, because not only do businesses have to know their state requirements, such as Colorado's 2% cap, but they also have to know what Visa requires or limits and what MasterCard requires or limits for accepting those cards.
The Small Business Rundown is the official podcast of the National Federation of Independent Business, the member-driven voice of small business. NFIB and our members advocate to keep America's small businesses strong and independent in Washington, D.C., all 50 states, and the nation's courts.
Welcome to the Small Business Rundown, a bi-weekly podcast with information on independent businesses' victories and challenges in Washington, D.C. and state capitals. I'm Beth Milito, the Vice President and Executive Director of NFIB's Small Business Legal Center, sitting in as the guest host this week. Joining me to discuss credit card surcharges and an updated legal guide we recently published on this issue is Rob Smith, a senior attorney for NFIB's Small Business Legal Center. Rob, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Beth. I look forward to talking about credit cards.
An important topic for a lot of our members, that's for sure. First, can you kick us off with a primer on credit card surcharges and why some businesses apply them?
Absolutely. So I think it makes sense to step back and first talk about swipe fees. So the fees that are associated with credit cards. So credit cards are a complicated and frustrating issue for small businesses because on one hand, they're the most convenient method of payment for customers to use. So businesses are almost forced to accept them. Almost nobody carries cash anymore. So we've become a card society. But there's a hidden cost that comes with credit cards, and those are the swipe fees that I mentioned. And swipe fees are usually a 2 to 3% on average charge that are imposed by the credit card networks, such as Visa or MasterCard. And these charges are imposed on every single transaction where a customer uses a credit card. So if you put that into perspective, a small business, let's just say a restaurant, that's serving a table whose bill is $100, on that transaction, they're going to have to pay $2 to $3 to the credit card networks just for processing the credit card. And this reminds me of a brief that we submitted a few years ago, and we actually talked about how swipe fees can become enormous every year. And we cited in that brief, it was our Corner Post brief, Beth, as I'm sure you remember, a Dallas ice cream shop that paid over $25,000 in 1 year in swipe fees. So these fees can get to be outrageous quite quickly. So that leads me into surcharges. So credit card surcharges are one way for businesses to make up the hidden cost of accepting credit cards and negate the fees that come with them, essentially, the swipe fees. So if you think about it, a credit card surcharge is a small percentage, usually between 2 to 4%, that a business will impose on the transaction if the customer pays by credit card.
Thank you for that very informative answer. That was very helpful, too, to have the background on the swipe fees, too, because we certainly hear about the impact of swipe fees on small businesses here at NFIB, and that is a big issue for our federal public policy team. I think we're going to talk more in a little bit about some federal legislation that might help with that. I will just say I think this is also coming from our Corner Post brief. Swipe fees last year, I believe, recorded a record over $187 billion last year. So that is just a tremendous amount of money. And as you said, for a small ice cream shop, $25,000 is a lot of money. So yeah, swipe fees add up really quickly. And for that reason, we have heard more from small business owners reaching out to the NFIB Small Business Legal Center and our support line in particular for information and help with instituting the credit card surcharges. And as a result of more and more of these inquiries, Rob, you put together a very helpful guide that lays out the rules, because there are quite a lot. States have different rules, is that right? That lays out the limits and caps on these charges. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how those limits work?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. One of the complexities with imposing credit card surcharges or putting them into place is that it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to the requirements with them. So businesses that use these surcharges to cover the hidden costs of accepting credit cards have a lot of compliance requirements that they have to follow. So credit card surcharges are legal in most states. They are banned in California, Connecticut, Maine, and Massachusetts. So those are the four where surcharges are clearly banned. In Texas and Oklahoma, the law is somewhat murky. There have been conflicting decisions within the state about whether surcharges are legal. So businesses in those states would really want to talk to a lawyer to get help on the surcharge issue before enacting any type of a surcharge. But also part of the problem is even in states where the surcharge is legal, the amount that a business can surcharge varies. So, for example, Colorado caps that amount at 2%. In other states, the credit card networks themselves have an agreement with the business, and part of that agreement will be that they can not impose a surcharge exceeding a certain limit. So, for example, Visa caps the surcharge at 3%. So any business that accepts Visa cards can't impose a surcharge more than 3%. Well, MasterCard imposes one at 4%. So it's different. It's not the same. And that's part of the problem. And that was part of the reason for the guide, is to show just how complicated this issue can be, because not only do businesses have to know their state requirements, such as Colorado's 2% cap, but they also have to know what Visa requires or limits and what MasterCard requires or limits for accepting those cards.
Wow, this sounds a bit complicated, and I know I've reviewed the guide and read the guide, and it is a bit complicated. So one other way in which businesses can incentivize customers to use credit cards less is by offering a cash discount. Before we move on to a discussion about cash discounts after the break, are there any final thoughts you want to share about surcharges?
Yeah, I think one important thing to note is we've talked about the complexities of credit card surcharges and how the requirements vary, but there is one requirement that seems the same in all jurisdictions where credit card surcharges are allowed. And that is that businesses must notify consumers of the surcharge, and that notification must be obvious. And it must be at 3 different points on the business so the consumer can see it. So first, the surcharge has to be posted at the point of entry on the business. Second, it has to be posted at the point of sale where the consumer can see it. And then third, it also has to be a separate line item on the receipt that the consumer gets, noting that a credit card surcharge was implemented and how much that was.
That's a great point, Rob. Thank you. And now a quick break.
NFIB is excited to launch the Small Business by the Numbers podcast, your resource for critical small business economic insight. Co-hosts Holly Wade, NFIB's Director of the Research Center, and Peter Hansen, Director of Research and Policy Analysis, offers a behind-the-scenes look at the economic landscape through the data and stories of small business owners. Find new episodes of Small Business by the Numbers online at nfib.com/podcasts.
Welcome back. Now, can you tell us about cash discounts and how that works for small businesses in conjunction with surcharges?
Yeah. So I think the best way to think about a cash discount is it's almost the opposite of a credit card surcharge. So if you think of the surcharge, what the surcharge is it'll be a business that imposes a 2 to 3% addition on whatever the advertised price is for a good or service. A cash discount, meanwhile, is the business subtracting from the advertised price for the good or service, usually 2 to 3% for customers that use cash. So they pretty much work the same way. One is just up. The surcharge increases the price and the cash discount decreases the price that the customer sees initially. They each come with their own pros and cons. So it's really a tough decision for a business to decide which is best. For example, like we talked about, credit card surcharges allow businesses to recover the hidden cost of processing credit card payments, which can add up extremely quickly. Also, a benefit is that credit cards are the most convenient method of payment nowadays. Nobody carries cash. So a business that doesn't accept credit cards or doesn't have a surcharge is turning off a lot of their customer base by not accepting credit cards, or is losing money on the swipe fees. On the flip side of that, a surcharge also risks turning customers off because those customers may look for that good or service somewhere else. where they don't have to pay the surcharge, such as some of these bigger corporations like Amazon that may not have these surcharges. And obviously, small businesses don't want that. As we've discussed at length, another drawback is the complex requirements and the varying requirements that come with the surcharges. So those are all something that a small business needs to think about before just imposing a surcharge.
That's a very helpful overview. And while we can't cover every detail of NFIB's printable guide on surcharges and cash discounts, is there anything else you want to emphasize or highlight before we sign off today?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot. The one point that I would leave us with, I think it's in the best interest of businesses to offer cash discounts or strongly consider offering cash discounts instead of imposing credit card surcharges. And the reason I say that is because of some of the reasons I've already mentioned. One, offering a cash discount keeps the convenience of credit cards. So it allows customers to continue to use credit cards, which is the most common method of payment. It incentivizes using other forms of payment, such as cash, check, automatic transfer, etc. Using a cash discount instead of a credit card surcharge doesn't alienate customers, so it won't send those customers looking for the same product elsewhere. And cash discounts are legal across the US. They're legal in every state. There's not as many requirements on cash discounts as there are on credit card surcharges. So I think when you're deciding between the two, businesses should strongly consider the cash discounts as opposed to the surcharges. But the reason for the guide is we want them to know both options and the requirements that come along with each option so that they have all the information that they need.
I think that's very good advice, Rob, and I thank you for sharing. Yeah, sort of that as a closing thought. I think that's incredibly helpful. I know that the guide will be available in our show notes today, too. The other thing I wanted to point out that is also in our show notes, too, is information on the Credit Card Competition Act. NFIB has been fighting for passage of this act, which would require the nation's largest financial institutions, which is about 30 banks, to enable credit cards to be processed over at least one competing network, in addition to Visa and MasterCard. So that competition, that additional network competing with Visa and MasterCard, would lower the swipe fees. So we would love to have small business owners out there send support to their member of Congress. You can do so again by going to our show notes there. And again, this is common sense legislation. It has bipartisan support. Vice President J.D. Vance co-sponsored the Credit Card Competition Act as a senator. And he said on the record, small businesses are being crushed by swipe fees. And we certainly have heard that, Rob. Isn't that true?
That is true. Yeah.
Rob, thank you again for joining me to provide more information on credit card surcharges, cash discounts, swipe fees, and more.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
As I mentioned, this episode's show notes include a link to the NFIB Small Business Legal Center's printable legal guide that explains surcharge and cash discount regulations by state. If you're interested in taking action to urge Congress to support credit card swipe fee legislation, you'll also find a link in the show notes to learn more and do that. Thank you for joining us on today's Small Business Rundown. We'll be back every 2 weeks bringing you news and analysis from Washington, D.C. and state capitals so that you, whether you're a business owner or a supporter of one, can continue to blaze a trail.
The Small Business Rundown is brought to you by NFIB, the voice of small business. You can find us at nfib.com and on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.